This episode is brought to you by Trident Coffee, the veteran-owned brand where every sip inspires you to live life full steam ahead. At Trident, they are more than just coffee. They are storytellers. It's crafted by veterans. Their instant cold brew is perfect for those who serve, those who have served, and anyone who values wellness. Featuring natural ingredients like organic mushrooms, adaptogens, and nootropics, it's more than just a morning pick-me-up. It's your new wellness ritual. Enjoy it at home or on the go, wherever your day takes you. Trident Coffee isn't just about great tasting coffee. It's about empowering you to be the healthiest version of yourself, because great veterans make great citizens. Try their instant cold brew coffee today and taste the freedom of wellness. Remember, when you choose Trident, you're not just choosing coffee. You're choosing a path of connection through health and wellness. Use promo code DTD15 for 15% off your order. In 3, 2, 1, and we're live. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the DTD podcast, Dynamic Tales Delivered. In the studio this week, a man who answered the call to duty after the tragic events of 9/11. He embarked on a journey that he would see him serve as both a Green Beret and a Delta Force operator over a 20-year career. His path to elite military service began in 2001, and just 3 years later, he earned the Special Forces tab. For 8 years, he served as a Green Beret, executing some of the most challenging and covert missions around the globe. But his story doesn't end there. In a testament to his exceptional skills and unwavering dedication, he successfully completed the rigorous assessment and selection process for the unit, where he served for nearly a decade. Throughout his career, he conducted 13 combat deployments to some of the most volatile regions in the world, including Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria. His bravery and sacrifice have been recognized with numerous awards, including a Purple Heart. He founded the First Responders Coffee Company, an innovative venture not only providing top-notch coffee, but also dedicating a portion of its proceeds to supporting firefighters, law enforcement, and paramedics. Please welcome into the studio, Brent Tucker. What's going on, my friend?
Hey, man. Thanks for having me. And thanks for such a audacious intro. It almost doesn't seem like it's me.
It doesn't, but I'm telling you, it's everything about you and more. Let's kind of talk. Just, you had an amazing career. It was a very unconventional career, but I think a big point along your whole story, as I read about you, as I watched interviews with you and stuff, I want to talk about a word or two words: victim mentality, something that you never, ever stand by. You are completely against it, and you're completely about changing the narrative, but I think it overarches your entire story. Can you kind of give me what your definition of victim mentality and what you think is going wrong with the world today with victim mentality?
Man, that's right up my alley. Let's get right up on my soapbox right away.
Right away.
I mean, just the words, the name, I can't, honestly can't understand it. It makes me physically upset, watching those people, hearing that. Gosh, I don't even know where to start with that. Well, other than my own story, to have a victim mentality makes it sound like here in America, if you are dealt a bad hand, then that's the course you're on, and nothing can change it. And call me a xenophobe, call me what you will, but that's just absolutely not the truth, and that is not what America is. To have a victim mentality is to accept something that is not reality. I grew up in a double wide trailer, and that's not where I ended up. But if you've accepted that this is your situation, this will always be your situation, then it sure will be.
And let's go back to your youth a little bit. I know that your family, I want to talk about them and being, military minded, patriotic. I know that I had seen that your father wanted to be a pilot in the Vietnam era, but his sight kind of held him back from that. Other than that, did you have a pretty patriotic family? Did you have people that were proud to be Americans? Because like you said, you came from the bottom up, but I think you can still have a sense of pride that no one can take away from you.
I wouldn't say we were just, we weren't that family that I don't even remember us flying the American. In fact, I know we didn't. We didn't have an American flag at our house. We weren't, over the top American. But my dad still took me to air shows. But I really think that was more because he loved jets and loved airplanes more than he loved the military. And it's not that he didn't love the military, but no, we definitely grew up in a pro-American house. But again, we weren't we didn't overly celebrate July 4th. My dad was just too busy, worrying about his life and what he had in front of him, things that he wanted to accomplish, and really didn't wasn't too big on the big picture of America. I know it sounds almost bad, like he was like he wasn't, but you know what I mean. He just
Not
wasn't that over the top
right.
American guy.
Yeah, not at all. But what I think is interesting is because I don't think you would say you're extremely patriotic. I don't think you would say you're over the top either in the stuff that you do. As a matter of fact, I think with your podcast and a lot of stuff you do, you call out rights and wrongs and kind of, let them know what you feel about each thing. You're never just pro, 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 pro. What I would ask, though, is not coming from a military family, not coming from an overly patriotic family, how do you go from air defense artillery all the way up to the most elite unit in the entire world?
Never intended to join the military. Again, not anti-military. Was not pushed to go to the military. But 9/11 changed my life the way it changed a lot of people's lives. Almost to go back to the very beginning, to not have a victim mentality. That's really, my dad instilled traditional, hardworking American values in me. Yeah, he may not have called them American values. They were his values and our family's values, but they were absolutely American values. And when America was attacked, we could have either been victims and said, woe is me, or we could do something about it. And the overarching theme of really my military career and my life was to live a life of no regrets. And I knew, I felt a desire and a pull to go to the military and do something about this. And really, the deciding factor was, I said to myself, hey, one day you're going to be 70 years old, and when you look back on your life, are you going to always regret that you didn't do something when your country was attacked? And my answer to myself was, I think I will. And that was really the what pushed it over the top for me and pushed me to join the military. And I had no idea what I was joining. I mean, I was joining the military, but I do. Uh, in fact, it's odd that I went to a ground unit, because I could have, at that point in my life and earlier, could have picked out every single jet and airplane in the arsenal from Vietnam on. So I was much more knowledgeable about that. But obviously that takes a degree, ROTC, and to get in. And to be honest with you, I didn't even know all that at the time. But what I knew was, just deep down, is someone got close and personal with us. And I think the only way that I really felt like I could get back at them was to get close and personal to them and have them see Americans on the ground being the last things they saw. And so to me, it was going to have to be the Army, to do that, or the Marines. But it was a friend of the family that was in the Army at the time, and so he was the one I went to. It was like, hey, I don't know anything. I just want to know. I want to be on a ground unit. And ironically enough, he was in air defense, and that's what started me along the path of air defense. Even though that was my end goal, what I wanted to do, and the Army was going to get me there eventually, I definitely didn't start off on the right path to shooting people in the face.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. I want to talk about those 2 days and kind of what they meant to you. And the 2 days that I'm talking about are when 9/11 happened and the day you decided, this is what I need to do. Because even though it might have happened that day, I don't think you fully came to that decision on that day. So can we talk about those 2 days and how they kind of affected you differently?
I'm guessing it took me about a week to, absolutely to decide 100% this is what I'm going to do. I had a friend that was going to Florida State University, and I went up there, spent the night, talking to my friend about it, just getting a different perspective. Still, that didn't, made each other, feel better, lamenting over what just happened. But I came back down. It definitely took me a couple of days. It was not an easy decision. My dad, I talk about growing up in a double wide, and that's absolutely true. I grew up dirt poor. What I found out later was my dad was working like a dog to invest into a family business to better us as a family, and he eventually did just that. So I really wanted to take over the family business from my dad. So it wasn't an easy decision for me to join the military. Everyone in my small town of Sanford, Florida, wanted to leave Sanford. I was the guy that was more than happy to stay in my small town, go to the same place for breakfast, go to the same place for dinner. I love small town life, but obviously God had different plans. September 11th changed everything for me. I eventually made the decision, and that as the joke goes, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans, and that's been a reoccurring theme in my life.
Well, let's talk about with your father with this company, because do you even know anything about it while he's putting all this away? I mean, do you know about this company, or do you know that he's going to be part of it, or is it just kind of thrust upon you?
I know a little bit about it. I know it's something my dad works 60, 70 hours a weekend. I know that he expanded it from a Sanford location to a second location in DeLand. Around middle school, things started to change for us financially, and things loosened up a little bit. But it wasn't until high school that things were actually going very well. And my dad, kind of at some point, unbeknownst to us kids, was just reinvesting in the business, reinvesting in the business, reinvesting in the business. And at one point, he was like, you know what? We're good. This is where we want to be. And we moved into a bigger home. He bought a boat, bought a sports car, and life was good. And at that point, which was high school time. So at high school time, things had changed to being pretty good for us. And it changed my line of thinking to, hey, this family business is actually that my dad has really poured his heart and soul into is something worthwhile, and it's something, it's a gift. Like, why not? I could go and try to make something that and recreate something that my dad's already done, or I could just fall into the family business. And my grandfather started it, so I'm very old school, and so that my grandfather started it. My grandfather's the most amazing man I've ever met in my life. My dad is a close second. So to me, it was an easy choice to stay in the family business and keep pushing on that legacy.
Well, so let me ask you then. There something pops up there because you say life changed, and I wouldn't say got easier, got better as you hit middle school, then even better in high school. Now, as a kid, it can be a very different life from being poor and living in a mobile home and seeing everyone around you have stuff, growing into someone who has a boat and a sports car and a nice house. How do you think that changed you, and how do you think it affected you?
I'll tell you how it didn't change me and didn't affect me because of my
Okay.
dad. Because when I was 16, I was supposed to go 15. I was supposed to go to, I was in a public middle school, and I played sports my whole life. I was good at sports. I made the all star team and baseball. And that's all I wanted to do. Just sports ruled my life. And we had a employee quit out of the blue. And the summer between whatever grades that would be, my parents' bright idea was, hey, let's homeschool Brent and he can work in the family business. And he can work 4 days a week and do school 2 and 3 days a week. So even though things were better for us financially, my whole high school was nothing but going to work, coming home, doing school at night, whatever days off I had, doing more school because I wanted to buy a car when I turned 16. And even though it seemed, and I knew my dad could buy me a car or help or give me a lot more help buying me a car than what he did. He ended up matching what I saved. I ended up saving, I think, 2 grand. He put in the other 2 grand, and $4,000 even back then still wasn't a very nice car, but it was my car. So it was things like that. And when I worked in the business, I started out as the lowest guy at the business. Nobody cared I was the owner's son. I swept the floors and took out the trash and was the low man on the totem pole. So that type of instilling that you are nobody until you prove it mentality was ended up being one of the greatest building blocks of my character and in my life.
Do you think it made the biggest effect on what you were about to do? Because I know that you've said that even when you were ADA, you said if you can't be the best in that, there's no way you can be in special operations. If you can't be the best in the regular line unit, there's no way you can go to that. Do you think that since no one gave you that approach and everyone was like, we don't give a shit who you are, that is probably the biggest lesson you ever learned in your life?
Absolutely. My dad told me how you gonna own a feed store if you can't sweep the floors properly. So sweep the floors right, and then we'll give you your next task. And of course, and something happened to me between, I want to say 17 and 18. I have a 9-year-old son, so I'm waiting for this to. I know it's early, but I'm waiting for this to flip in his life. But hopefully, as a father, if you say the right things long enough, it sits in. And I wasn't a great worker. I mean, I wasn't a bad worker, but I wasn't the hard worker I needed to be to own that store one day. And something happened around 17 or 18 where it just clicked, and I started having pride in our family business and ownership into it as a worker. And that is really when everything started clicking for me and the correct mentality that I needed to carry with me to the military.
Okay. So when you joined the military, I know you talked to your friend, an ADA guy, family friend, and stuff like that. What's your end goal?
Chief Butters. Chief Butters. Let me tell you about Chief Butters real quick.
All right.
Chief Butters was the man. And I still don't understand. They just don't make them like Chief Butters anymore. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. The guy rebuilt a truck. He does his whole kitchen. He redoes. He makes his own patios in the backyard. Just nothing the guy can't do. Now that's everything in a weird way that I've done now in my career, or as an adult. But I've done it with YouTube. Somehow this guy in the 80s and 90s knew how to do all these man skills without the use of the internet. So to me, he's a longtime family friend. He is just the epitome of a man, or he's just the apex of a man. And so when he tells you, hey, you need to go to air defense, there's no questioning Chief Butters. So when Chief Butters says that's where you need to go, that's where I went.
So what's your end goal?
Oh, so the end goal, sorry.
That's all right.
My end goal really was very, I wouldn't say nearsighted, it was very short term. My end goal was to enlist for 4 years, be done, go do a tour of combat, get it out of my system, come back to the family business. That was my end goal. Pretty simple.
That did not work out in your favor at all.
I would say it worked out very much in my favor.
Okay, yeah.
But not sticking to those plans. But ironically enough, again, those were my plans, and I've proven time and time again to be a horrible fortune teller.
So, in all of the talking to you, I hear over and over out of you, this man was a role model in my life. This man, my grandfather was the greatest man ever. My father was the second greatest man in my life. Chief Butters, they don't make him like him. Let me give you a alternate reality question. Those guys aren't in your life. What do you think you turn out like?
No, you're not talking to me on a podcast right now because no one knows my name or cares about what I did. I assure you. I don't know what I turn out like, but it wouldn't be anything worth talking about. Guaranteed, no doubt in my mind.
I guess I push that question a little further then, and I say people that grow up without that strong role model, or without that instinct inside themselves to do it, how do you change that? Because I think that happens more and more often, and here I'll give you an example of it. Military's not meeting its numbers in recruitment other than the Marine Corps. Police are definitely not meeting their numbers. Firefighters are, I think, barely meeting their numbers. First responders in general are not. People do not want to do that anymore. So how do we change that? Does it go all the way back to what we're talking about, where you have these strong role models that show you, and they don't necessarily have to be a man. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying these strong role models in place to teach you how to be a good and honest human. What's going on with it?
We have a culture problem. We have a massive culture problem in this country. And it doesn't have to be a man. But I'm going to tell you, and I'll stand by this, but it should be a man.
Okay.
There's different roles and responsibilities within the house. And if you're a young boy, you need a man, a father in your life to drill these characteristics in you. And men and women just have different lives. They have different life experiences. Women don't have to, rarely, in general, and people can flame me all they want. Everyone can pick and choose random one-offs. But the truth is, a man's life in general is much more physical. There's a lot less verbal rewards for what you do. For what you do, your reward is a life that's worth living and providing for your family. So absolutely, I think it should be a man. Yes, there are some women out there that have raised some great young men, but in general, I think there's a very, very strong case to be made that families that grow up with a father and a mom in the same household and are both active in that child's life come out with a much better product than single parents.
I agree. I think I would take it one step further. And you talk about raising sons as a man. I think daughters, it's even more important as a dad to show them this is the kind of man that you need to have in your life. You need to be the role model that they grade everything against.
Absolutely. I have three daughters. I have one son and three daughters, and I couldn't agree with that statement anymore. And here's the thing: they both bring different things to the table, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's the yin and yang of life. The female should teach them the softer things of life and caring and give them that emotional support and lift them up and show them those things, and him or her, and the husband or the father in their life should show them, whether it be tough love. I don't want to say tough love, but someone has to be, the disciplinary. Someone has to set the example. Someone has to show them what a husband and a man looks like and acts like, and what providing for a family looks like. And there's no other way to do that than to be there.
So let me ask you, when you join the military and you go in, you have all of these role models in your life. You have these people to look up to. You're not trying to run away from anything. You're not trying to make a different life for yourself, which happens a lot. So when you get there, is it everything that you thought it would be? I mean, I know that it's very hard to judge that in a basic or an AIT or when you're very first starting. But is it, when you went in, is it what you felt? Did you feel like the person that you thought you would?
The last thing I'll say about having specifically my dad wasn't very caring, and he didn't pull me to the side and give me like a lot of life lessons and come home every day and be like, "Hey, how was your day at school?" He was generally a little bit grumpy when he came home, and he better not have heard anything about what you did to make your mom's life
Right.
more difficult. But I will tell you, he did pull me to the side when it mattered, and because he didn't do it all the time, when he did it, I listened, because it was almost, I don't want to use the word magical, but it was special. Like, oh, dad's talking to me. He's imparting something to me. I better listen. So he wasn't even that active in my life, as far as that is. But what he was, without a doubt, was a role model, and the things he did, and when the way you act will speak so much more than sometimes what you say. So just being there and doing it, your kids are watching.
Absolutely, 100%. So in the military, when you're in and you're looking around and you see these guys, are you in awe of some of these drill sergeants and stuff? I know it sounds so dumb now that your career is over, but I can remember seeing these guys when I first joined and just thinking like, holy shit, like this is the coolest guy ever.
Absolutely. I remember both of my drill sergeants. To this day, I remember both my drill sergeants, and I've reached out to one of my drill sergeants. He ended up going. He was from the 82nd, and so when I went to Fort Bragg a couple years later for Special Forces training, we had a thing called the white pages on AKO, Army Knowledge Online, and I found out where he was in the 82nd, and I cold called him. I just walked in and said, "Hey," and I still called him Drill Sergeant Augie, and he looked at me and he's like, "What are you doing here?" So those guys were very influential, but and for the same reasons. They didn't coddle me. They didn't say nice things to me. They weren't actively a part of my life as far as lifting me up. What they did was tell me what to do, how to do it, and they themselves lived the part.
Do you try and model your career after them? Because I can tell you in my law enforcement career, you pick people out that you try and model your maybe career after, and maybe not exactly what they did, but something that stood out to you about them, or you took pride in what you saw from them. Was it that way for you in the Army?
Yes, they were both very different character wise, and oddly enough, it actually goes back to some of the people who had the most influence on me as a young man were the manager and assistant manager at our feed store. So I'll take a step back just for a second and talk with my drill sergeants. We had one guy named Tim Carey who was one of the hardest workers you'll ever meet. Super quiet, not very personable, and sometimes almost borderline rude, but he always knew what he was talking about and could outwork you. So it was really, you couldn't really complain to him because he just was better than you at your own job. The other guy, our assistant manager, was Brian Sheffield, who was very personable, always had a new joke that he wanted to tell you. Everybody loved him, but always found a way to get the job done. And those two type of people and personality sets are a lot like my drill sergeants. Drill Sergeant Todd was a very quiet guy, didn't say a whole lot, but when he said something, you better listen up. And Drill Sergeant Augie was a character, yet still not the type of character they didn't take serious. He took him very serious, but I mean he was real funny. Unless he was making fun of you, then he wasn't so funny. But those that type of personalities, both of those, has kind of been what I wouldn't say it modeled my personality, but it's shown through my personality, which is kind of both. Where if I don't know you and you're not really part of my circle, I just don't say a whole lot. I think it's important to be quiet and not always be the outgoing person who talks too much. Be quiet, listen for a while, find out what other people have to say, and when I'm around friends or people within my circle, I'm a lot more jovial. I know there's some people who have met me and then got to know me later, have told me like, man, I didn't even think you liked me. Yeah, I'm never mean to anyone, but that's just sometimes the what people start to assume if you're not overly nice to them or you don't go out of your way to talk to them. And it's never my intention. I'm just fairly quiet right off the bat, and I think that's a good thing.
Let's talk about a little bit when you were just talking about those guys and you said the two different personalities. This guy was always better at you at his job. He could always outwork you. He could always do this. I kind of have a question for you and everything that I've read about you. And I kind of want to know, do you think you can ever be the best, or is there always someone better than you?
I think there's always someone better than you. I do. And I think the better person at the end of the day may win more times than not, but no one's unbeatable. No one's unbeatable. So even when I was at the very top of my game and I thought I was, the best in the world at what I did, I still trained with a fear that they're out there somewhere and I might run into them one day.
Let me ask you something else about that. When we talk about all the training that you did, when you talk about being at the top of your game and knowing to yourself that you were one of the best in the entire world, can that be a dangerous situation to put yourself in, or a dangerous mind state to put yourself in?
I think the unit does a very good job of keeping people humble because there's always someone at the unit better than you as an individual. So as an individual, you're always striving, always striving. But again, it's a balance. But when you come together as a team, when we loaded up on a Black Hawk at 2 o'clock at night with the blade spinning under night vision goggles and it lifted up with my feet dangling off the sides, and I looked around the helicopter, I knew we were the most lethal force in the world without a doubt in my mind. So, I think there's a difference there a little bit. As an individual, you're always striving to better yourself and to never let your teammates down. And that's your biggest fear, is letting your teammates down. But when you put in that work and you lift off as a team, there's no room for humbleness at that point. You take off as the baddest MFers out there.
And that's what I wanted to ask you. When you look around and you see that, you know you're the most lethal force out there, and you know these guys around you are going to get it done. Does it take away the fear, or is there still fear there with you?
There are missions where just whatever it is, there's just missions for whatever reason don't sit right with you. You look at the intel, you look at where they're at. There's just something about some missions that do give you a little bit of jitters, and there's some missions just like, we got this. It's just another day at work. So I've got a lot of missions under my belt and a lot of tours, but still, even towards the end there, there's there are still ones that, like, well, maybe this is the one. But when you get close to the objective, all those are things that are running through your mind during infill. When you get to about 1 minute out, you're just worried about your job. You're just worried about your job and what's next in front of you. And you don't really have time for fear or second guessing to sink in, because everything's moving so fast. You're almost on autopilot. So really, that nervousness, when it creeps its ugly head, because that is what it is. You have to keep that at bay. Does go away when you get close to target.
Over your whole career, and the reason I ask you, does it take away that fear? Because we're talking about at the pinnacle of your career, the pinnacle of your job. Comparing the guy that just talking about his basic training drill sergeants to the guy that was a Green Beret to the guy that was an operator with, as you said, the most lethal force in the world, how do you change? Not just by fear. There has to be a multitude of changes that happen in you.
Well, I think that the changes that happen are setting a goal and making it. Setting a goal and making it. And it gives you, at some point, it gives you a confidence that you can accomplish whatever you set your mind to. And as cheesy as that sounds, it's absolutely true. I set a goal to be a Green Beret, and I became one, and my confidence rose. I would say appropriately, to that. But then again, you have this balance. Yes, you're a Green Beret, but you're a new guy as a Green Beret. So what do you really know, and what have you really done? And it kind of, you have this weird cockiness about you to the outside, to people who aren't Green Berets. And you think, yeah, I'm a Green Beret. But then you have to come back to some seasoned veteran Green Berets that have seen combat, and you haven't even been to combat, and that cockiness goes right out the window. Then you go to die school, like, the hardest school, one of the hardest schools in the military, and you knock that out. And then you go to sniper school, and you go to these, you just keep going to these schools, and you become, there's confidence without laurels to rest on, to look back at and say, yes, I am confident, and this is why I'm confident, is a false sense of confidence. So you're made into that person, and appropriately so, by proving yourself time and time and time again.
I think we can even say, because you say it a lot, when you're done with those schools, when you're done with sniper school, breacher school, dive school, you're a master of the basics, and that's it. Mm-hmm. And you learn only through trials, tribulations, all of that kind of stuff to become truly what that job is going to teach you about. And I think more into the question that I'm asking you is, do you feel like you were a different person? You and I have talked offline, and I told you after almost 2 decades as a cop, your worldview changes. You become jaded, you become different things. So I'm wondering, as you come in and you just want to do this job, and you said, I want to meet the enemy face to face. They did it to us. I want to go back to them. At the end of a career of 13 deployments in all of these countries and all of the things you've seen, it has to change a little bit.
I'd like to say it didn't change me, but I know it did, and it didn't change me to as much as I know that it changed some guys. The unit is such a stressful place to work at. It's just a stress factory. Every day you could be tested. Every day your job could be on the line. Every day you could get called out, to go to somewhere, in some corner of the earth on a no-fail mission. It's just a stressful place to work, and it will wear on you over the years. And I remember just some of the funniest guys I've ever known in my life going through training with them, and then seeing them as team leaders, not joking almost ever, mad at the world, coming into work, just, quiet and angry and going, man, what happened to that guy? Those guys eventually retired, and it slowly comes back. And now as I talk to those guys, they're the people I remember them being. And I know that happened to me as well, to a certain point. It's just being human. I don't think it completely did me in. I've always been lighthearted, deep down, and tried not to take anything too serious that didn't have to be taken too serious. But yeah, it still affected me.
Yeah, and I think it did. But, I've heard you say too that you could sleep like a baby after doing the job that you did. Do you think that is any bravado on your part, kind of protecting who you are? Or do you think that that is exactly how you feel? Because I think why I ask the question is a lot of people will look in and say, I don't understand how you can do that job forever and sleep like a baby. And they don't get it. And you and I have talked, and we said that people don't understand it until they've seen the job, until they've been there. So can you explain a little bit of that? Because I believe you when you say it didn't change you completely.
So I think those are two different things. When you're talking about your personality changing, just either from the stress of it or from growing into that position. I don't think the leader on the team should be the biggest jokester. I think you should still have fun every now and again, but you have to grow into that role. But what PTSD can do to a person and steal their joy, and really change who they are, I think are two different reasons, why someone changes. And I've said it before, and I'll keep saying it. I don't have PTSD. I don't, as much as people aren't going to like to hear this, I don't, generally speaking, I don't understand. Let's say it this way: I don't understand the amount of PTSD we have in our military. To me, it's just very. I just look at things very logically, and I don't understand why you would raise your hand to go to combat in a time of war, see combat, and then not like what you saw, to a point where it changes who you are and changes how you perceive things. It you've you drove on the streets of America for, since you were 16 for the last 10 years, and now because of one trip you made for a couple months, you come back and you can never drive on the streets the same way again for a piece of trash. I don't understand the mentality. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm saying I don't understand it. It just doesn't make logical sense to me. So I saw some horrible things, and I got exactly what I asked for. What did you think war was? Did you think war was pretty? Did you think everyone goes home? Do you think everyone gets a trophy and everybody wins? No, absolutely not. So I feel like I had a very realistic take on what war was, and I got a very very realistic taste of what war was. So it didn't mess with my psyche because I got what I expected.
So let me ask you then, because I think this is the best part of your, and I mentioned it in the very beginning. This is my favorite part of you and reading about you and everything. It's a very hot button topic. It's a very hot button approach to how you say it. Would you agree? And you do that with a lot of things with your podcast. I want to know, first off, if you catch a lot of flack for feeling the way that you do.
I always think it's an inch. I just assumed, I just catch a lot of flack for it. For that's it. And don't get me wrong, I catch plenty of flack for it, and that's okay. I would say I get an equal amount of people coming back and saying the same thing. You're like, hey, I've always felt that way. It's just a really taboo thing to say out loud, and I'm glad someone's saying it because you're absolutely right. Here's the problem with this: resources are finite. They are not they're not limitless. And I do think some people had a really bad day at work, worse than me, that has altered their life and need help. And that's where all of the resources need to go. And I believe that number is small. And so they deserve all the resources that they could ever ask for or want or need. And when all these people are claiming to not be able to carry on with their life, you are sucking resources away from people who actually earned it and deserve it. So I get a little mad about it. And there are a ton of fake PTSD veterans out there, and you should feel ashamed of yourself because that's what you're doing.
So how do we separate in the filter? How do you know? You say it's a small number, and I get what you're saying, but how do we know what's real and what's not? There's no test to do it or anything. So how, I want to know from you who's been there, done that, how do we start to figure out? Because you're right, it can be a drain on the situation.
Well, that's a real good question. And I do it here at work. People come up to me with problems. I'm like, well, I don't want to hear about problems. If you come to me with a problem, you at least better come with an attempted solution. This is a problem that has no perfect solution, but I can tell you what would be a really good starting point. A really good starting point would to say, and I'm not making this up. These are true stories. For a guy to come home and say, hey, I have PTSD, and say, oh yeah, what happened? And they say, oh well, our base got mortared. Okay, were you hit by the mortar? No. Did you lose a close friend to the mortar? No. Did you lose anyone in the mortar? No. It just scared me that I might lose my life because we might get mortared tomorrow. Well, I'm sorry. You're just going to have to be stronger. Next. I could say it better and I could say it, longer and make it less abrasive, but I'm just going to cut to the chase. So we have people who were mortared but never got hit, and no one else got hit, and you have PTSD. We have people that were on the radio at headquarters that never left the wire claiming PTSD because of the things they heard on the radio. And I'm sure it's not nice to hear people screaming on the radio for their life. But that PTSD or the resources belongs to the other people on the other end of that radio. You are going to have to suck it up and realize that you were never in danger. So you're just going to have to realize that. Someone's just going to have to tell you the inconvenient truth. You, sir, are mentally weak, and this isn't a real thing. You weren't in danger, so you're okay. Next. We can cut out half of them just with where they got their PTSD from.
Can that ever happen?
No. It could. It just won't.
All right, let's go back to your career a little bit. I want to talk about when you're a Green Beret.
So you're going to save me from myself at this point?
No, because we're going to come right back to it. So just stand by. We'll be back to it.
Okay.
So you become a Green Beret. That's the first step to being this elite warrior that you're going for. And you've talked about it, that what I took from how you talked about your training was it was good training, it was hard training, but I don't think it was exactly what you expected of it. There were certain aspects of it, Syria school and stuff like that were, but I think the overall training isn't what you expected.
That's correct. The initial training what I became as a Green Beret after advanced schools like ASOT and Sniper School and Cephalic, which is a CQB school, the process gets you there. But what you think before the process is when you graduate the Q course, when you don that Green Beret, you are that advanced warrior that you think of as a Green Beret. But it's just not true. And this isn't me dogging the system. In fact, I wouldn't change the system. That was a me problem. That was me not understanding how the system works and how we actually develop our Green Berets. So the Q course, the SFQC Special Forces Qualification course, is exactly what it needs to be. Long, grueling, but basic. And when you graduate that, you will be the master of the basics. But unfortunately, if you thought you were going to be more than the master of the basics, you won't. That's exactly what you'll be. But again, the caveat to that is, and that's exactly what we need you to be, the master of the basics, because we're going to build onto that.
All right, let's drag you back into the crosshairs again.
I'm ready.
The reason I asked that question is because I figured that's how you would answer it. So let's talk about the people that show up and they say, I showed up here. I've been here 2 weeks. I've done this. I deserve it. There's a lot of them out there, law enforcement, first responders, military, that think because they showed up. You got rookies that come out of the academy that can't understand why they don't have holidays, weekends, they're not working days. It's a problem that we're seeing a lot in this kind of environment. What do we do to go wrong there? Because I know you have an answer. And what do we do to start working to fix that? Because I think we're going to come back to the same kind of answer. Shut the fuck up and do your job.
That is the answer. But of course, the question is, but how do we get there? How do we get a better product? And the truth is, we are weaker as a society. We are mentally weaker as a society right now. Our culture, and this isn't me dogging the next generation. This is exactly how society works. Our current generation that's old enough to serve and old enough to become law enforcement has enjoyed a very soft. And I mean that this isn't a derogatory statement. They've enjoyed a very soft life. Their parents, out of wanting to do the best for their kids and provide the most for their kids, has allowed them to grow up soft. And the hardest thing I do is tell my kids no. It really is. I'm not a rich person, but there's not much. We'll just take my 9-year-old son who wants everything every time we go to Walmart. There's not a whole lot I couldn't buy for him if I didn't want to. But I tell him no, because giving him everything isn't good for him. And so we've created a soft generation out of our country's success. So the answer always goes back to the parents. I know that's a big picture, and how do we get there is a whole nother discussion. But so the very first thing is the parents. The second thing is the recruiting process. We don't have these issues, generally speaking, in special operations and especially tier 1, because we have a very stringent recruiting process. And when it comes to first responders and just hiring in general, we've really watered down the hiring process to promote certain people. And whenever you water down a process, this is what you're going to get. So we're reaping what we sow.
Okay, let me pose something to you. You say a very stringent process into tier 1 and the higher level special operations. As much as I would like to change some of the standards that go into it, they're already having a hard enough time bringing people in, making even more stringent. How do we solve the problem of bringing people in? Because then you're down even more, and you're putting more work onto the guys that are already there, putting it in.
Absolutely. That's a good question. We've actually covered it in the podcast. And I say this all the time. Your best recruiters are happy employees. Happy employees are your best recruiters. The problem, one of the reasons we have a recruitment problem is because we have unhappy employees. And let's just take police, for example. I think there's a lot of cops out there that love their job, love who they work for, love the policies they're working under, and they're telling other young men, "Hey, you need to come over here and do this job. It's awesome. We get to run down bad guys and keep our community safe, and you should do this." No, they're all fed up with what they're doing, and they either get out early if they haven't built up enough years under their belt to make a career out of it, or they're just trying to limp it across the finish line. So the answer to that is through the leadership of police departments actually sticking up for their guys and actually allowing their guys to do their job. They'll turn into the best recruiters, and then when people want to do a job, whatever standard you make for them, they will achieve it because they want to do the job.
So let's go back to your career. How did you do that? Because when you're going through selection, let's say for the Green Beret, it's a lot of alone time, you would agree. It's a lot of individual tasks. For the unit, it's a little more secretive. A lot of people don't know about how that selection process works. My question would be, is you learn a lot to work autonomously. And I think you, over your career, have worked autonomously a lot. When you work autonomously, that's the best way to work because you are the one that makes yourself happy. When you have to work in a group, when you have to work in an organization, it's not that easy because working autonomously, you do it how you need to do it. You change all of that with a group setting. So let's use you in the military and you with your company now. How do you take that and make your autonomous workers part of that group and to make them grow with it?
By giving people the ability to work autonomously. And what I mean by that is a lot of people aren't necessarily comfortable, or they don't feel like they're capable of it because you haven't given them the opportunity to make a decision on them, to empower them to work by themselves, which means they're going to fail, they're going to make a wrong decision, and that's okay. I've made wrong decisions in every position I've ever been at in my military career. But here's the kicker about mistakes. You can make as many mistakes as you want. You can't make the same one twice. And as long as you live under those left and right limits, you're going to work with good people, and you're going to be able to develop those good people.
So can I ask you a mistake that you learned from?
Oh gosh, where do I begin? In one of my CQB courses, we had I believe it's called it's been a while. I believe it's called a West device, which it's your initiator for your door charge. And we're walking up, and I'm a student wanting very much to graduate this course. I really need to graduate this course. And when I get up to the door, that's where you're supposed to flip the West device from safe to fire. And when this device is on fire, then you can set off the charge. As long as it's on safe, the initiator is gonna work. And so I'm sitting there, and the other guy whose job is to be right by the door and do his last check at the bomb that's on this door, he's a foot away from this thing inspecting the bomb before he pulls off. And the instructor sees that my West device is already on fire, which it should not be at this time. It somehow got in my kit and it got flipped on fire. And that was a huge, huge mistake. And I went in, and that run that I did, so they stopped it. I got yelled at real quick. We made it safe. We pulled the guy away from the door bomb, and I put it on safe. We basically all right, well, now you're done being an idiot, Brent. See if you can continue without screwing the rest up. And I proceeded to have one of the worst CQB runs of my life because I just was mentally out of it. So what potentially could have been the biggest spiral of that course, and could have more than likely, I've seen that same mistake begin people spiraling to where they get kicked out of the course out of a lack of performance. I basically went back up to the next team that was going to run up to the house. And I said, hey, I pulled the breacher to the side. I said, hey, do you mind if I take this run from you? And they saw my screw up. Everyone heard me getting yelled at. Everyone knew what was going on. And so he knew what I was asking. He knew that I needed to get back in the house and I needed to prove to myself that I'm not that screw up. So I did. I went back. The instructor was there like, Brent, twice in a row. You sure you want to screw up inside the house again the way you just did? And I'm like, yeah, yes, Sergeant. And they're like, all right, it's your career. And but I did everything right. I went back, had a great run, and got right back on the horse. So again, it's okay to make mistakes. It's even okay to make big mistakes, even mistakes as big as having your explosive device on safe. And I could have blown my buddy's hand off. But you have to get back in there. You have to shake it off, and you have to have the confidence that you won't make that decision again. And the only way you can have that confidence that that was a one-off mistake is by putting in the hard work before this happened, not hoping I'll rise to this occasion.
This episode brought to you by Max Belts. Guys, are you looking for a perfect accessory to wear every single day for every single scenario? Well, you've come to the right place. We all know that nothing stands up to wear and tear like a good leather belt. If you're looking for the toughest leather belt on earth, then you've come to the right place. Max Belts. They're handcrafted in the USA by veterans who are serious about their craft. And if you're looking for a belt that's tough enough for your active lifestyle and help support those who've given so much to our country, look no further than Max Belts. It's the toughest belt on the planet. It's a perfect solution for casual or dress wear and ideal for utility and firearm carry. It's the highest caliber of American craftsmanship, and it also positively impacts our military charity partners. Once again, Max Belts, you can't go wrong with them. I wear them every day. They're the toughest belt on earth. And you can find all of this and so much more at maxbelts.com. All right, so let's fast forward to boots on the ground, actual live situation. You just talked about a time that you messed up in training. I'd like to hear about a time that you messed up in training and you drug that forward to a live operation where it literally clicked in your brain.
So, God. So, I'm on my first mission at this high level place, and you really want to, like, you're actually getting on helicopters and doing it for real, and you want to prove to your teammates who have done this for a long time that you belong. And just everything went wrong. When I say everything goes wrong, just usually nothing, just one incident going wrong doesn't normally, turn into, hey, this was a bad day or a really bad incident. It's usually like several things that add up. And for whatever reason, my peltors quit working while we were on the helicopter. They just quit working, and they quit working about 30 seconds before we landed. And I didn't get any of the updates. And we were supposed to be going after a mobile target, and now we're landing in front of a house. And I don't understand why we're landing in front of the house. But the guy next to me just jumped off the helicopter. So I'm like, well, I guess this is where we're supposed to be. And I guess no one wanted to talk about it. I guess I should have known. I don't realize for a couple minutes and I was a commo guy as a Green Beret. So I know commo. And I have common sense. At some point, I know not hearing anything on the radio is bad. So my peltors weren't working. I didn't get any target updates. We end up shooting this individual that comes out of this structure, and we had thrown a bunch of grenades in there, and we even put a wall charge up there at some point. And my boss comes up to me and goes, "Hey, search this guy, the guy that we had shot coming out of the house. Search this guy and look for anyone else in here." I can't remember the way he worded it, but he didn't sound like look in case someone's in here. Well, I search, and I'm moving all this rubble. And it's 130 degrees, and we're in full kit. This, I'm mixing kind of a funny story. I just got done searching, the target that was the individual that was on the ground at the doorway, and I also forgot to put on my rubber gloves, and so I had my fabric assault gloves, and they were all bloody, and I was getting sweat in my eyes, and I kept on wiping my eyes and wiping my eyes and wiping my eyes because they were burning, and I was just covering my face in blood, and so as I'm now moving on to this rubble, trying to move everything out of the rubble, couldn't find it, and I just thought he said, "Hey, look through this rubble, see if you can find something." I go back out there. I said, "Hey, I can't find anything." He goes, "Look again." And I should have known when he said, "Look again." Again, just a situation where I sent a clue that he knew something I didn't. I gave it, in hindsight, a 90% go, and I came back to him, and he said, two questions: "Why is your face all bloody?" and "And what's wrong with you?" And I was like, "I don't know." I don't know the answer to any one of those questions. And he storms into that room, and he does the other 10% of the work and finds a dead body in the rubble. And he's like, "What's wrong with you?" And I'm like, "Man, how did I miss that? How did I not know?" And even though I didn't, I would have, and I thought to myself, how did he know that there was someone in here? Because he got all the radio calls and I didn't. But the truth was, I didn't see the task through. I was told to look through the rubble, and I didn't see the task through. I never made that mistake again, and it served me well. And that for many deployments to come after that, to see a task through, and that was a hard lesson to learn, and wasn't my best foot forward on this very first mission at this new unit. But I had to learn from that, and again, just like the door charge, I had to swallow that and be like, "Yep, that one's on me, and it'll never happen again. Can't make the same mistake twice."
Let's go into a little more of, I want to understand. So you do 8 years as a Green Beret.
Almost seven, a little over seven.
Well, I'm just trying to figure out, like, you're probably pretty good at it by then. You're kind of cruising through your career now. What rank are you now?
When I'm at the unit, when I first started the unit.
No, when you're closing in on the end of your Green Beret career.
Oh, I'm a sergeant first class.
Okay. So you're an E7, you've done it, you've been to all these schools, you've proven yourself, all of these kind of things. When I read about it and when I saw that you left, it made me wonder, were you not fulfilled? Was this not what I just can't figure out why you went to that next level, because it seems like you were doing rather well. You didn't try and leave the Green Berets quickly. You didn't try and get your training and then go. You stayed around for a while.
Oh, I love being a Green Beret. And to this day, one of my best deployments was as a Green Beret, running the commandos out of SOTF East, Special Operations Task Force East, out of the N2KL region. I know I just said a whole bunch of things that some people may not understand.
Do you
But
want
it
to
was,
explain them or not?
yeah, we can go into that. So the commandos were usually, as a Green Beret, you spend a lot of time in the village, and you develop these villages into to able to allow them to defend themselves, and you're running this kind of low level partner force. You're a force multiplier. You're trying to make this ragtag group of guys more more capable, and so 12 guys can train 100 guys, and now it's not 12 guys running around the battlefield, it's 112 guys running around the battlefield, and it's a very, very effective tool in our arsenal. I would dare say it's probably our most effective tool at war, large scale. I mean, the beginning of Afghanistan, Green Berets owned the invasion of Afghanistan. Green Berets took down the Taliban, in Afghanistan. They were amazing what they did, very effective. The unit's definitely more surgical weapon. So I love being a Green Beret. Now the commando mission was a unique mission set within the Green Berets, to where you're actually working with a highly trained counterpart that's fairly well funded, and they're a quick strike force. They're like the Afghan Rangers is what they were, and they were motivated. They were a good partner force, and SOTF East was the whole eastern part of Afghanistan. Nangarhar, Logmen. I got to think of what N2KL are all the provinces of that we worked inside of, and it was a hot place to work as far as enemy activity. We killed hundreds of people on that deployment, and it was great. Still to this day, worked with some of the best guys I ever worked with were NSF, and I've been on record before saying it, and I'll say it again. I wasn't the best guy on my ODA. I was just the guy that went to selection. We had an all-star team of an ODA. We really did. So working, I was a very proud Green Beret. The only reason why I left is, quite frankly, I was addicted to war. I loved war. It is the adrenaline of going on target and removing bad people from this earth that don't belong here is one of the greatest things you can be a part of. I think Hemingway said it best, which is when he said, "Hey, there's no hunting like the hunting of men, and those who have done it will ever be satisfied doing anything else." It's exactly true. I went to the unit because I could see the handwriting on the wall that what we call white side soft, regular SEAL units, regular Green Beret units, regular Ranger units, all of white side soft. It was getting harder and harder to go outside the wire, and they really wanted these wars to wind down, and I wasn't ready to wind down, and I knew there was one place I could go to keep going.
Okay, let's look at a couple things with just that statement right there, because this is where we go again and we talk about decisions that you've made or things that you've said where people won't understand it from the outside. You were not ready to wind down war. You were not ready to stop going there. A lot of guys say that they go back over there over and over again because it's easy. It's your mission. It's what you do every day. You don't have to worry about, are the bills paid? Are they this? Are they that? Was it that for you, or was it just taking boot to ass?
It was taking boot to ass.
Okay.
It was, I would do anything to go on a mission. I would, as a Green Beret, you drum up your own intel. Very rarely it happens, but very rarely does someone give you a mission packet. Here's the bad guy, go. I worked my ass off to build intelligence packets and to go on as many raids as we possibly could in the 6 to 8 months we were there, because that's all I ever wanted. I just wanted to go on one more target. As soon as we got back from a target, I'm already thinking about how fast what's the next target and how fast can we get there.
Now, you said you never had PTSD, but let me ask you a question. When your brain thinks like that, do you cut some other things out? Do you cut family out? Do you cut personal affections out? Does it change the way you conduct business other than military business?
My wife would say yes, so I guess that's the only the only answer that counts. And here's one thing, and I'm not a robot, so I don't want people to think like, oh, this guy's just on his high horse and he's acting like the death of teammates never affected him. That's not what I'm saying one bit. I've cried like a baby in the shower on many occasions, but I refuse to let bad days at work affect me for the rest of my life.
So let me play devil's advocate then, because I want to go back to this again, because I think it's a serious point that you bring up when you say you won't let a bad day at work affect you. And you've used a different example when you ask a guy, well, what's your PTS from? What's this from? And then you say you won't let one bad day. Some would say, well, I think you're overlooking the fact that a lot of bad days can pile up. And then you have almost a insurmountable obstacle to go over. So I want your answer to that, because I love the answers that you give for this kind of stuff, because I think that's where people would disagree with you and they would say, yeah, right, one bad day, that wouldn't. But what if you have 30 bad days, or what if you have 45 bad days? How do you go around that? Because I know you had to have 30, 45 bad days over 20 years. It's just it's a game of numbers.
Here's where I think people are going to misunderstand me. And it's to say this, because the first part's going to sound pretty prideful, but you have to wait for the second part.
Okay.
The answer to that is, I've had a lot of bad days. And I think you'd be hard pressed to find someone out there with as many bad days as I've had. Just, they're out there, but hard pressed. I've seen a lot of action and over a long period of time at its highest level. And the reason why I say the same things I do and I feel the way I feel isn't because I think I'm some badass who can't be affected. It's actually the other way around. If I can see those things and if I can move on with my life and if I can get over it, I actually don't fancy myself as something that special. If I can do it, I think anyone can. I think it's the exact opposite of what people are going to assume or think of me. So that's what I say to that. If I can do it, it anyone can do it. Like I said, I wasn't even the best guy in my ODA. I wasn't some super soldier. I wasn't some robot. I'm very fallible, and if I can do it, I think some people just need to be told a hard truth.
Okay. So as you come over and you go to your selection for this new unit, I've heard you talk about kind of moral decisions and moral kind of gray areas. And this is where I wanted to tell you, I told you that I wanted to talk to you about undercover work. Because I think when you're doing this kind of stuff, you have to become a different person than who you are. And I think you've given an example before about saying they tell you to burn this flag. Would you burn this flag? And you said, no, I would die for that flag and I would do this and that. And they said, well, you would do that, but you would die. I want to know back then and now, because I think you might have changed that role a little bit, becoming someone that you're not. Can you talk to that? Because I know you have. I know from the missions that you've done. I know from what you're doing now, you had to have.
Absolutely. I mean, there's times in undercover work that you're absolutely clearly pretending to be someone that you're not. In fact, even if it's not, it's deeper than that. In one aspect, you're not just changing how you think. You're changing how you walk. You're changing how you present yourself. I mean, most people can tell a military person when they walk in the room just when they walk in, shoulders back, confident, looking down everyone. They just can see that person. Be like, well, that guy was part of military. You can't even walk like you're strong. You have to walk like you're feeble. You have to walk like you're scared. You have to walk like, I shouldn't say scared, but you have to walk like you're unsure of yourself. You have to be a completely different person to sell it. And like anything else, it goes back to, I just don't accept answers like, well, that's just how I am. I can't do it. I just don't accept terms and responses like I can't do that. And I know it sounds cliche, but yeah, you sure can. As long as you say that, you sure can. I'm the same guy that can get on a helicopter and remove people from this earth in the middle of the night, and I can also put on a suit and tie and go to an embassy and brief high level missions, and I can also turn around, get in civilian clothes, wear things that aren't Western, and walk like and carry myself like I'm an easy target. The human psyche is a very, very elastic thing, and it can do whatever you tell it to do.
What do you think you are? Mentally stronger or physically stronger?
In my 30s, I was probably physically stronger when I held records in the gym in Syria, but now it's only mentally stronger. And this is what I love watching, sports. I think everyone loves sports analogies, but when you watch things like Kobe Bryant, when I just got done watching Swamp Kings with the University of Florida and what it took them to win national championships in the 2000. All of these people, they don't talk about talent. They don't talk about how great they were. The only thing they talk about is how hard they worked and the mentality that it took to get there. And the truth is, mentality is just a decision. It's just a decision. It's a decision you make that day. Whether you're in special forces selection, there are two types of mentality. Someone who take every step is the worst step in their life, and it's just miserable. And the other guy is like, it has to end eventually. This is awesome. It's just a mental outlook. And at any point on in your life, you can just decide to think differently. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm saying it's possible.
Did you do it the whole time?
Yes. Yeah.
Without a doubt, your whole career, that was the way you thought.
I'm human, and like any other time, I get into my slumps,
Of course.
But I don't I don't remember anyone pulling me out of these slumps other than me saying, "Hey, now we're stopping it. This isn't how I want to live. This isn't me. This isn't who I want to be. This isn't going to get me to my goals. It has to stop."
What pushes you at the end to say it's time to go?
I don't think there was any one thing that pushed me. It was without a doubt several things that just kind of happened at the same time. I was very much my own worst enemy when it came to my physical health, and I'm sure maybe somewhere there's a balance between there. But the truth is, the type of person that's going to work there is going to work themselves to the ground. That's just what they're going to do. They're not going to want to miss a mission. They're not going to want to miss a day of training. They're not going to miss anything. And at some point, when you ride that hard for that long, you are going to have to. Even when I got shot, I didn't miss a deployment after I got shot. I didn't miss a training event that I knew of. If I wasn't in the hospital, I didn't miss a training event. There were times where I may not have free falled into the training objective. I just met them. Met them on the LZ, or the drop zone. I met them on the drop zone in the truck, and continued out that way. So I ignored my physical health, and it really took a toll. The bad leadership. I had one of the worst leaders in my career. Actually, happened to me there. But none of these individual things were it. Having 4 kids, and having to deploy, continuing to deploy, even though my team time was basically done. I didn't want to. It just wasn't where I love deploying, but I love deploying as a shooter. Deploying as a headquarters element just wouldn't give me the same satisfaction. So really, between a lot of negative things that all had their inputs, but also coming back from my last trip to Syria and just having this feeling of closure. I just had this feeling of closure. I said, it just switched one day, and I was like, I've done it all. I've done it all, and it's time.
Let me point something out too. When you and I have talked offline, we said specifically, we're not going to talk about when you got shot. I just want to point out that you brought it up, not me. Okay? I want that known, that you and I set very good ground rules about that. And
yeah, and I want to make sure no one misinterprets that. Like, oh, he doesn't want to talk about getting shot. He's got PTSD from it. I've talked about it many times on podcasts, and I just want to tell the same story over and over and over. Podcast I'm on. So anyone wants to hear that story, you can hear it in another podcast.
There's a multitude of them you can hear it on. And I said, quite frankly, I'm tired of hearing that story. We're going to talk about
my back progressively just got worse and worse and worse and worse. Like, to the point we'd clear an objective, and the first thing I would do was move the couches out of the way so I could lay on the ground and stretch out. My back was just killing me. I was having some mental issues with TBIs. I was having some really bad issues with remembering things. I could tell some real horrible stories about remembering some really basic stuff that really alerted my wife.
Can we talk about at least one of them? We don't have to go in depth. We can go as far as you want, but I
Oh, sure.
think I think TBI is a really big overlooked thing. When we've talked about PTS, when we've talked about these other things, I think TBI is really overlooked these days.
TBI is going. I wish we would take a lot of the resources from PTSD and move them over to TBIs, because TBI is absolutely a real thing. And TBI is the next thing. We're going to come back to this, but the next thing, and one of the most detrimental things wrong with my body was sleep. My sleep sucked. And I had a weird sleep issue. It's not that I couldn't sleep. I slept like a baby. I could sleep 8, 9, 10 hours, but I would wake up feeling like I wouldn't dream, which means I'm not getting into REM sleep. I would wake up with ringing in my ears, completely, kind of discombobulated about, trying to put one foot in front of the other. It was just the first 30 minutes of the morning was just the worst. So those were all the things that were really wrong with me. It just became very difficult to work. But, speaking, so one of the stories for TBIs, driving to church one day, and I don't know how many turns I missed, but we're just driving out to the countryside, and my wife at some point looks at me and goes, "Hey Brent, where are we going?" And I had no idea. I had no idea where we were going. Again, I mean, I'm not an idiot, so I could look around the car and see how I was dressed and see how everybody was dressed. And I thought, and I said, "No, we're going to church." She goes, "Why?" So I tried, and which is what I would do a lot. Yeah, I honestly would cover my tracks a lot, either with notes or just being smart enough to kind of overcome some of my shortcomings. But the truth is, when she asked me that, she knew I did not know where we were going. I may not, like most dads. I'll tell 3 or 4 quick stories. I may not be the best with remembering everything when it comes to dates, but I know my kids' birthdays. I know my kids' birthdays. I get a phone call one day asking for my wife. I said she's not here. She goes, "Well, it has to do with a medication, and I need to talk to a parent." I said, "Well, I said, "Oh, is this for my daughter?" She goes, I believe so. Is it your daughter?" I said, "Yes." She goes, "Well, what's I think she wanted my daughter's full name, couldn't remember my daughter's middle name, and she wanted a date of birth." I couldn't remember her date of birth. She's working with me. She goes, "I know dads aren't always the best with dates. Just tell me what month she was born in." I couldn't tell her what month my daughter was born in. Just a complete blank. Things would happen to me during the day where it just seems like you're if your memory is a disc, like an hour just got erased off that disc, and I couldn't remember where we were for the last hour. I couldn't remember where I parked my car when I would go to work. I would have to write myself notes about where I parked my car when I got to work, so I could find my car in the parking lot, so I didn't go walking around the whole parking lot looking for my car. And I know
So
it got really bad when I found this note of me that I wrote to myself about where my car was parked, and I didn't remember writing the note to myself for where my car was parked.
so I got to ask you then. There's a couple things that come from that. You say you don't have PTS. You say that you've worked through all this. And I don't know what other word to use than this. So please correct me if you want to. When you're trying to explain the birth date and your daughter's middle name, is there shame there? And I know that's not the right word, but
I think that is the right word. Absolute shame. Absolute, just shame for not being able, for thinking, for knowing that at this very moment you're supposed to be on top of your game, and you're supposed to be this tier one operator whose greatest asset is your mind. It's actually not the greatest asset to an operator is being a problem solver. Being a problem solver is the greatest characteristic you can bring to the table. If you're a great problem solver, you'll be great at everything, and that's what you need. We need guys to be great at a lot of things, and And when you're mentally deficient, you feel like you're a fraud, and you feel like you should step forward and remove yourself from the team because you know they deserve that. But you also have this desire for the ride not to be over. You have this addiction to the adrenaline, to this is your personality, this is who you are, this is your identity. It's not that easy just to step away from it, and there's no guarantee you're going to come back to it. If you step away from it, it's a horrible predicament to be in.
Okay, so a lot of things come up from that. When you say shame is the right word, the reason I say I don't think it's the right word, because there's a reason for it. It's not just because you're not doing it. It's not because you don't care. It's there's a reason for that. And then when you go forward and you say, you should step away from the team, that's your whole identity. But there's a reason for that too. All of those missions, everything that you've given to that unit, you almost take yourself out of that equation because you say, I'm not doing right for the team, but you're not giving yourself any credit there either. There's a reason why you're that way, because of every single mission, because of the TBIs, because of the concussions, because of all of that kind of stuff. So where do you give yourself grace there then? Because that seems like you could get in an OODA loop bad about, well, I don't want to leave the team, but I don't want to do wrong, but I don't want to leave the team, but I don't. And then you just end up in a circle.
Right. Yeah, it really is. And I don't know what the right answer is to that. Like I said before, we should take better care of ourselves, but I'm not this isn't a one-off story. This has happened to many an operator. It doesn't happen to all of them, but again, this isn't a one-off story. That's for sure. But I'm just not sure you can separate the two. I'm just not sure you can recruit the type of guy who will do who will do anything for his country and anything for his teammates, and as a high performer at every level and self-driven, which is another and kind of say intangible, but what you want out of someone. Problem solver, number one. Number two, self-driven. You have to be self-driven, and self-driven people are going to continue to drive themselves to their detriment. And I think it's just part of the type of personality it takes to work there. And I don't know how they get separated. I really don't.
So part of that fear whenever you're leaving, do you think that fear is also fear of not having a mission anymore?
Yeah, it goes back to when I said it was just one more mission. That's all you want. You just want one more mission, and when you go on one more mission, that's the other the cycle. So you go on one more mission. Well, was that enough? No, because one more mission is always the mantra. So it'll never be enough.
So do you ever get angry at yourself when you're coming to the end? I know there was a lot of stuff. There was a lot of reasons to leave, and you didn't want to necessarily get off the ride, but are you ever angry at yourself when you're doing it and thinking you're quitting? Or because that's where, in everything that you and I have talked about, everything that I've read, I think that's where you would have the most trouble. You think you're quitting.
Exactly. It really is. It's unable to say the words "I quit." I couldn't say it in die school, or I couldn't say it in the Q course. I couldn't say it at selection. I couldn't say it in die school. I couldn't say it in OTC. I've never said the words "I quit." And even though, again, it's when I look back, it's not quitting, but it sure as hell is what it felt like, at the time. So just the inability to say, I need a break, which to someone like that, in that time, I need a break feels a lot like I'm quitting.
Okay, so for you then, how do you fix that? I'm not telling you to fix it for everyone. When you look at it for yourself, how do you go, okay, it's not quitting. It's just taking a break. It's just maybe pivoting to something else. How do you sell it to yourself? Because I feel like you would be the hardest person you would sell it to.
Well, I'll never be able to sell it to myself. Just to to be frank with you. What needs to happen, and we've talked about this, and I've talked about this to high level people, back at work who are interested about making changes for the better and want to better understand this is we've got to reduce the amount of explosives in our training charges. Our training charges don't have to be as big as they are. We have to be more vigilant about what we expose ourselves to, and is it worth it? There are times you have to have a big charge and you have to be close to that charge. You have to train like you fight. But I think we can train better now that we're seeing this pattern of what TBIs are doing to our guys and what it does to them holistically to their body. It throws no one really understands why, but TBIs isn't just a memory issue, it's a sleep issue. It's also a hormonal issue. Once everyone who has TBIs has sleep issues. Everyone who has TBIs has low testosterone. Everyone who has TBIs has low vitamin D levels. It does something nasty to your body. In fact, before I really even understood what was going on, the truth is, I was just mad at myself for about 4 or 5 months. I thought I had a low level for the first couple months. I thought I had a low level sickness that I couldn't shake, and I gave myself some grace. I'm like, I just think I have this low level sickness. Like something's wrong with me.
So is this after you retire, or is this the end of your career?
This is like towards the end,
Okay.
maybe the last year that I'm
Okay.
in,
Okay.
and I just thought I had a low level sickness. At some point, I even just was upset at myself for becoming lazy. And I know I laugh at that now, but as if you spend 19 and a half years not being lazy and now you're just lazy. But that's what it felt like to me. I was like, why am I just a lazy bastard now? Like what is wrong with you? And I was just mad at myself for this. And then a couple months after that, it turned into this other odd fear. There was a certain time there that I was certain I had cancer and I was dying. It was that bad. I thought I was dying.
But
I
there's nothing from a doctor. This is just you.
I I didn't go to a doctor. I refused to raise my hand and say something's wrong with me. I need to get looked at. And this is almost how crazy the mentality is that I think I may be dying of something because there are days I can't, if I'm not at work, I can't get off the couch. And I would I'd rather die than go to a doctor. That's a little bit dramatic, but at the end of the day, that is what happened.
But
Um,
I gotta cut you off for a second. I gotta understand because so you think that you possibly have cancer and that you're dying, yet you won't make the decision to go yes or no from someone with a little bit of authority to go, you have nothing to worry about. It's this. You would rather just wither away than admit, is it defeat? I don't even know if that's the right word.
it's it seems, yeah, I laugh at it now, but I don't think about this a whole lot, really. So it is looking back at it and having these conversations with you, I don't completely understand that what is wrong with you. That's how dedicated you are. Now we do get blood tests drawn like once or twice a year. So when we got our blood test drawn, I did go to the doctor, our PA, and I asked him, I said, "Hey, would you know in our blood work if we had cancer?" And he goes, "Brent, do you think you have cancer?" I said, "I don't know. Something's wrong with me." He goes, "Well, I'll let you know." And so he calls me back in his office a few days later, and he goes, "You want the good news or the bad news?" And I'm like, "Bad news. I knew I had cancer." And I said, I'll take the good news." He goes, "Good news is you don't have cancer." I was like, "Oh, what's the bad news?" He goes, "You have the lowest level of vitamin D I've ever seen, and you have more estrogen in your system than testosterone." He's like, "Have you been feeling okay?" I said, "Doc, I don't feel good." He goes, "Yeah, I know you don't. How long have you been feeling like this?" And but oddly enough, that's not. I didn't even bring up the TBIs at that point. that just became a, hey, how can we kind of fix you right now with what's going on? I know we're jumping around here.
No,
According to the
when
timeline.
you said that you had the highest levels, all I saw was you sitting there with your beard with like red lipstick and a wig on sitting in front of him. Like, I don't I don't know what the hell's going on. I do feel strange.
It wasn't for it was, and during this was the height of some of my memory issues with TBIs.
Right.
And again, it's easier to look back and assess some of this and when you're in it. But the TBI thing isn't something that you just lived with all the time. As I look back, whenever we would do explosive training is when I would have memory issues. Anytime we would do explosive training, which was often. Every now and again, you'd have weeks where you get away, you do something else, you go to the range and you concentrate on something else, and the memory would get better. And but we had this a couple weeks later, we had this real high intensity training with a lot of charges, both day and night, and the memory issues, came back really bad. And it was at that point where my wife was like, Brent, and I told her before, I was like, hey, I know what's wrong with me. It's all this blood work. And she was like, that's not all that's wrong with you. And I was like, yeah, the rest, it'll get better. It'll get better. And then it didn't. And that's when she looked at me and she goes, Brent, you will go back and you will talk to your PA about these mental issues you're having with memory, or I will. And that's when I went back and talked to him and said, hey, it's a little bit more than energy and sleep. I'm having some mental issues too. And he's like, well, let's talk about it. And really towards the end of that conversation is when he really talked to me. He's like, have you thought about retiring? I was like, uh, yes and no. But anyway, that's kind of what started.
But you laugh. But I want to know what you really thought when this PA sitting across from you says, have you think about retiring? Have you thought about it? I know it's not just a laugh with you, knowing how much you love that job, how much you said it was your whole identity. I want to know what you were thinking when this guy tells you from across the desk, have you thought about retiring? Because to me, I feel like all you're hearing is it's time for you to go.
To go back to something else I said, it's not that I didn't enjoy my job anymore. I very much did enjoy my job. But when I got back just a few months before that from my last trip to Syria, I just had this sense of closure about
Okay.
my career and my job. So it really wasn't any one thing. It was some of the bad stuff. It was some of the closure. It was some, it was some of the family stuff. It was a lot of everything that all just kind of happened at the same time. That when he said that, it didn't hurt as much as you would think. I was like, I don't know, maybe why this hasn't really crossed, and it didn't, for whatever reason. Retiring really didn't cross my mind at that time. It was just, how do I limp this thing across the finish line, whatever that finish line is or looks like. And for whatever reason, I didn't really think a whole lot about retirement at the time. I mean, I'm sure I thought about it as an option, but I do know I didn't give it a lot of thought until he brought that up, and at that point we started discussing retirement a little more seriously.
All right. When you get out, can we talk about the family situation? Is everything good when you get out? Because I know that you have said that you had to decide what you wanted to do when you grew up, when you got out. But is everything okay? Or are you really focused on that? Or are you kind of spinning and looking around? Kind of give me the lay of the land as you retire.
And retirement took a year. COVID had just happened. So getting to all these appointments, so I chose to medically retire instead of a standard retirement, which the only thing that means is when you medically retire, they front load all your kind of your medical assignments first. And if I was just to retire normally, they retire you and then you go do all your medical stuff for disabilities. So it just front loads your disabilities, but before you get out. And I was told, hey, that's the route you should go, and they were right, because sometimes that stuff can take a long time. So it front loads it. So it took me about a year to actually retire. So I had plenty of time to figure out at least an initial plan for retirement. I started asking some friends who were in business and seemed successful at business. And I just started having lunch with them. Some guys had got out in the last 2 or 3 years. Just asked them, hey, what are some lessons learned that that you have from retiring? How did you handle it? How did you do it? Would you do the same thing? What'd you do? I asked one of my friends, Louie, who was part owner in a training company, and I was concerned that my pay was going to drop, and if I didn't, retirement isn't a one for one swap for active duty pay, and plus I got incentive pay for being at the unit, so I was going to take a significant hit, and I was concerned about providing for my family. And I remember Louis saying, "Hey, just so you know, if that's what you're worried about, don't, because regardless whatever my company is doing, whatever situation I have, I will always hire you and provide for your family." And when he said that, I thought, you know what, I'm going to work for this guy when I get out. That's who I want to work for and work with. So he was part owner in a company called Velocity Training, and they focused on really tier one cadre that taught white soft, CQB, sniper, free fall, a lot of the tactical skills. And I thought I had a lot of relevant experience that I really wanted to get out there to the next generation of warfighters. So that's what I did for probably the next year. The first year I got out, and I learned a lot from it. Man, I learned a lot about government contracting. I was also a program manager as well as an instructor. It was great. But it taught me one thing that was very important. I always wanted to work for myself. I was going to start a business at some point, and I thought this was going to give me a lot of tools, and maybe I wanted to start my own, contracting company. And it taught me that you do not want to compete in the government contracting business. It is a squirrely business, and it's a race to the bottom for lowest price, technically acceptable contracts, and everyone's always trying to outbid everyone else, and it's a tough business to survive in.
Here's my question that I have from it. You go right back into training, so you really don't leave that world, and you're doing all of the same stuff.
Yeah, it was.
And I'm just trying to figure out, you seem to have made peace, and you say it's time to go, and you've got to look at yourself medically, and you got to do this, and then you go right back into it.
I knew that I wanted to be. In fact, I was the first tier one cadre of that business that ever said, "Hey, I want to be a program manager. I want to learn the proposal side of it. I want to learn the computer, the clip. I want to learn the clipboard side." And the other co-owner of that business is a guy named Rob Mott, and Rob was a great guy, and he taught me a lot about business. And he was blown away. He's like, "Why do you want to learn that?" He goes, "I'm glad you do." He goes, "To be honest with you, I think it would be easier to turn someone like you into a program manager and it'll never happen the other way around. So those skills that you have, knowing the classes, you know exactly what goes into these classes, you know exactly how to write to it. Just not a lot of guys want to do that." But some of that was those physical ailments. Standing in a catwalk in body armor all day was, things weren't getting better on that side of the house with that. I was still around explosives. Now I'm doing it as a cadre, and I can be smarter about it. And a lot of times I would walk away from the shoot house when we do explosive breaching and just say, "Hey, I can't be around explosives." And a lot of guys understood. They're like, "Yeah, I get it." So even though I did that, I was already trying to work my way out of a job being an on the ground trainer. I really wanted to gravitate towards being a program manager. But eventually, my want and desire to work for myself and be an entrepreneur was what I really, really wanted. And again, I just clearly am I love pain and misery, because nothing's better than working for yourself, and nothing's worse than owning your own business and working for yourself. I've never worked harder, longer, for less pay than I have starting my own business. But I will tell you this, and something I don't think I've told anyone else.
Oh, this is an exclusive. I don't have a sound to make, so
unless no one else has started a business, I don't think they'll completely understand. I'm sure people think about going on missions as being an adrenaline rush and awesome. until you take $50,000 of your life savings and you pull it out to start your own business, and then take another $50,000 loan. And once you start buying equipment, when you're buying things, you're not getting that money back. It's one thing to put it into another account that says First Responder Coffee Company, but it's still there. You can put it back in the other account whenever you want and walk away from this and be like, nah, never mind. Bad idea. Nothing was more of an adrenaline rush, riskier, scarier than taking on a loan that you can't repay anytime soon, taking out your life savings and dumping it into a business that you have no background into and hoping that it's going to work out. Scariest thing I may have ever done in my life.
I think that there is an altruistic thing in there, though, for you that you did it. And I think you took a lot from the guy that said, no matter what, when you get out, I'll take care of you. I'll take care of your family. Because the whole point behind this business, before the cigars, before the coffee, before anything, was helping veterans to do their jobs. Not only to give them something they could have, but also something they could use. So there was definitely a thought process behind that. It wasn't just let's make coffee and let's make cigars. It was let's help that next. And here's where it's interesting to me, because you used the example, I want to train that next group of war fighters, but you don't say it for this company. And that's exactly what you're doing. They're just not fighting a war. They're coming back and doing what they need to do on this side now.
I've said it before to people. It's not a great soundbite, so I don't know if I've said it in a podcast before, but it's true, so I don't mind saying it. It's not about the coffee. It's not about the cigars. It's not because I love coffee that much. It's not because I love cigars that much. Yes, I enjoy both those things very much, but those are both a vehicle to do good things. I really could care less what the vehicle was. To me, those were the vehicles that made sense, that I thought I could utilize and grow and expand in a way that I wanted to, for selfish reasons, to make money and to grow a business that was big enough to allow my family to work in and my son to take over one day, sure. But on the unselfish side, that was just the vehicle I chose to do good. Had nothing to do with coffee and cigars.
Well, let's talk about some of the good that you did. I want to talk about a paramedic that was stabbed that your company donated to their recovery.
Yeah, gosh, we've cut a lot of checks, and this is going to sound bad. I can't think of her name right off the top of my head. I know the story, and I'll never forget the story. And we still talk every now and again, where I just keep in touch with her and see how she's doing, see if she's posted on Instagram anytime lately, so I can see her name. So I hate not remembering names, but I'm not great with names. But yes, answer that. I'm gonna take a step back just for a second and talk about cigars. Okay. But why I'm gonna talk about cigars. When we became known as a company that would help first responders, we had an influx of requests that I could never fill. And although cutting checks and showing people that people still care about what you do and showing support is a noble thing. And although we've donated over $25,000 in support to first responders, that's not what makes me feel good. I concentrate more on the amount of requests I get and the people I have to say no to. And it's crushing to say, hey, something happened to this first responder and we're going to support them, but we're not going to support that one. That one we're not going to show support to, but that one we will. It's not a fun process to be a part of. And so we had to grow. And so I knew we couldn't bring on another coffee bag to increase sales. Like, we have to do something to grow this business, because we have to stop telling people no. And that's where the cigar line came from, was we thought that would give us our best shot at growing the business faster than just another bag of coffee was going to be. But that EMS personnel, she was awesome. someone told us about her. She was treating a victim that was also a criminal, and in the back of her ambulance in New York. Take him to the hospital. He wakes up, has a knife on him, and starts stabbing her over and over again in the back of the ambulance. And she has to fight for her life in the back of that ambulance. We don't get to support a lot of paramedics because of their job. They don't get injured a whole lot, and usually we send things to people who get injured to. And there's a lot of cops. Obviously, they're getting shot and injured on the job. It happens to firefighters less than cops, but it happens to paramedics probably the least. And I have a real soft heart towards paramedics because I would argue they save more lives on a daily basis than the other two combined. But I think they're kind of the redheaded stepchildren of first responders and don't necessarily get the respect that I think they deserve.
I
So I
think that's
found
firefighters, but
so I found that out, and I found her on Instagram, reached out to her, just cold called her, say, hey, this is what we want to do. I want to send you something, and just need your address. We just want to support you. And she said, awesome. Well, I'm not doing the job right now because I'm recovering. So send it to the floor at the hospital where all my friends are still working. Send everything to them. I don't want anything. And that's when I knew we had the right person to support. I said, I tell you what, if you don't mind, give me two addresses. Give me yours and give me theirs. And we're going to send them more coffee than they could drink, but I still want to send you something. And she reluctantly said, okay. And we send them all a check. And with that check, I write a personalized note into each one of them. And I try not to make it about me, but I let them know, hey, I know what it feels like to be injured on the job. I know the questions that you may have of yourself, the second guessing, this, that. So I talked to them about that. And I say, so I want you to know that it's usually about a page long. They're always different at the end because it's always about their circumstances. But I end it the same way every time. And I say, you can spend this money any way you want to spend this money. This is definitely not a demand. But my request is that you take this money and you do something for yourself that you would never have done. I want you to go out, get a limo, get the nicest bottle of wine at the nicest steakhouse, and treat yourself because you have a second chance at life. And I want you to enjoy it. And I want you to do something for yourself that you would never do. And we get great feedback of people telling us what they ended up doing with it, or how it how it helped them in their time of need. It was just it's the favorite thing. It's the best thing I do right now in life.
well, you bring up the cigars and saying that was how you helped to kind of bump this up, but you went a little crazy with the cigars. You were trying to launch them very fast. I think you did one cigar. Then in the second batch, you were going to launch 5, and then you wanted to launch like 5 more. And you kind of had to pull the reins in because you kind of went crazy with the cigars. So let's talk a little bit about them.
The cigars have been a godsend. I can't. My brother jokes that we're at first we were a coffee company that happened to sell cigars, and when this is all over, we may be a cigar company that happens to sell coffee. And we did the coffee company when it launched. I had what I would call a great business plan that briefed really well. And if you were to ever read it, you would be like, yeah, this thing's a home run. This is gonna be great. And it completely fell on its face and did not have the launch that we wanted it to launch. And to be honest with you, it didn't really affect me. I was like, well, I guess we're just gonna have to work at it. I guess it's just not gonna fall in our laps. Boo hoo. All right, let's get to work. And that's what we did. We worked tirelessly for a whole year. I probably took enough days off that I can count on both hands and just worked nonstop, cold calling, developing, redoing, finding our weaknesses, attacking those, pushing our products, going to shows. We just didn't stop. And we doubled our business in the first year, which sounds great. But when we doubled our business in the first year, we actually got to where I thought we'd launch at. So a year later, we are where we thought we would start at. But we came in heavy with a full line of coffee. And so when we started the cigars, I wanted to learn from that. I said, well, let's just see how the cigars go. Let's just do one product, dip our toes into this water, see how it goes, which is our alpha line. and that's why it's called the Alpha line. It was our first, and they sold like hotcakes. And we're like, well, let's do, which was our Alpha line was Habanos. We said, let's do a Bravo line of Maduros. They seem to be a popular cigar people are going to want. Let's try that. But I was worried that the Bravo sales were going to eat into the Alpha sales. At the end of the day, we were going to spend a lot of money launching a second line, and actually just ended up making the same amount of money and losing the money and launching that line. And we doubled our sales. It didn't cut into our Alpha sales at all. And then we launched a Charlie line, and we launched a Delta line, and then we launched a Delta Limited line, and it just hasn't stopped. And we launched, they all had 10 count boxes, and they had 4 count boxes, and then we have sample packs, and now we're about to have 25 count bundles, and it just never ends. And now we have lighters and cutters and ashtrays and apparel for the cigar line. And it's never ending. So you're always reinvesting back into the business. But
I think you might have learned that from your dad.
Yes, I definitely know what it's like to live like a poor person, even though your sales are doing pretty good. But I say this all the time, that I stole from someone else, which is I'm gonna live today like no one else will, so I can live later like no one else can.
Well, this is the one that I received. I ordered a 4-pack of them, and I told you when I smoked it, it's probably one of the smoothest cigars that you can smoke. A lot of cigars you can't smoke all the way down to the tip because you start getting that burn effect on it. Yeah. And these held up beautifully. Fantastic smoke. Absolutely amazing. I wanted to take them on the trip with me. We tried to plan it out perfectly, and it didn't work out, but when I got back, I had them. They were amazing. So you're doing a fantastic job with the cigars. I want you to know that from me as trying them out.
Well, thank you. I see I have a Habano there. Is that correct? Is that an
Yep.
Alpha?
Yep.
Yeah. My personal favorites are Bravos. Man, so my favorite cigar is a Liga Privada. Not my favorite all time cigar, like my dream cigar, but it's my favorite. You'll go and buy it anytime you want. It's not high price. It's a good popular cigar. And so our Bravos were really modeled after the Liga Privada. It's Maduro. It has a San Andres wrapper on it, just like Liga Privadas. We box pressed them, unlike Liga Privadas, but we box pressed them because I like box press cigars. So I made cigars for me, and I smoke it almost every day, and I love that one. Our Delta line is, we were talking about it earlier. It's a tri-wrap cigar. It's a $15 stick. It's a premium stick, but I assure you, it beats every $15 cigar in the market. Not even close. In fact, most Liga Privadas, which are, our Maduro is a $12 stick, and if you buy a box, they're $10 sticks. Most Liga Privadas are 15 and 17 bucks. Our premium stick is 15 bucks. Just, if people were real cigar smokers, when they smoked our cigars and looked at our prices, they would be blown away at the quality of them.
Yeah, I'm telling you, they're fantastic. Okay, we got to get to one last thing, and this is where I kind of came across you. We've got to talk about this podcast of yours, because it's not a guy that, was in special operations and he just talks about special operations. You call motherfuckers out a lot, a lot.
So this is how this came about.
I can't wait to hear this.
I didn't start a podcast just to call people out. That would seem pretty loudmouth of me, pretty boisterous, and it's not really who I am. Although, if you saw snippets of it, you wouldn't know any better. So I was on the Anti-Hero podcast as a guest, and they had a second guest there who was a female deputy, sheriff deputy. And towards the end of it, we're an hour into it. It's just like this. By the time you get to the end of a podcast, it's just people talking. Like, you forget the microphones are here. You're just having a conversation with someone. And so you get to this relaxed part of the podcast. And the host, which is now my co-host, Tyler, asked me, he goes, "Hey, do you have any secrets he kind of said it almost tongue in cheek. do you have any secrets that you want to tell us about, from the Delta Force? I said, no. I said, I don't really have any secrets that I want to tell you. And the truth is, most of what I did, wasn't as top secret as you'd think. But there's a few, and those are mine. And then she comes out of left field with this question where she goes, "Did Rob O'Neill really shoot Bin Laden?" And I turned to her and I just gave her a team room answer. And I said, "No, Rob O'Neill didn't shoot Bin Laden. That's the worst kept secret in all of special operations." And I really wish the SEALs would come out and talk about that more. But the truth is, they're too professional to get in the mud with that. But really, that's for them to deal with. And they're great dudes, and I wish they were. But Rob O'Neill definitely did not kill Bin Laden, and that was it. Well, about a week later, my phone is blowing up.
And we're off.
My phone is blowing up, and the host, Tyler, of the Anti-Hero podcast at the time, he made a social media short, and he puts on the title, "Delta Force calls out Rob O'Neill," and just played that snippet of me calling Rob O'Neill a liar. Although the other 59 minutes and 45 seconds had to do with first responders. That was just a one-off. It wasn't what the podcast was about, and it goes viral, and especially and exceptionally viral within the special operations community. At that point, I went to the comment section, and it had thousands of comments, and it had a lot of the same reoccurring comments, like, "Man, how can you call a guy a liar with no evidence? You're just going to call a man a liar and not prove it." And I agreed with them. They didn't watch the whole episodes. They didn't understand that wasn't the purpose of the episode. I was just answering, someone's question. But I felt a little bit convicted. I felt like, well, I called another man a liar, and I did not, and I gave no evidence of that. So I came back on the podcast and I said, you know what? I do think it's really messed up. I think it's stolen valor. It's absolutely stolen valor to claim to have done something that another man did. And even worse yet, to remove the other 3 SEALs in the room and say that you and you alone entered that room and killed Osama bin Laden and nobody else. And then you wrote a book about it, and then you became rich and famous off of a lie. The more I thought about it, the more it really pissed me off. So I did about a 2-hour episode. I did a deep dive into it, explaining step by step how it's a lie, and how Matt Bissonette, who also wrote a book, tells a very different story, who was in the room that night. And no one seems to listen to his account. And oh yeah, Amal bin Laden, who was also in the room that night, also gave a interview and said a team of Navy SEALs came in and killed her husband. So I can prove through other eyewitnesses there that he didn't do it, but his story is full of holes. And for about an hour, I just exploit his own story and prove how it's just not true. So that's started with Rob O'Neill. A lot of people started asking me to do Marcus Luttrell, and I said that I wasn't going to do the Marcus Luttrell story because people died. And even though Marcus Luttrell, his story is just as much a lie as Rob O'Neill's, but because people died, I just thought it was different, and I didn't want to take on that story. Well, although we took a lot of flack for what we did with Rob O'Neill, we got a lot of support, all support from the military community, and then 50-50, maybe 70-30, mostly support from civilians. But there's a lot of civilians that heard that story and it blew their mind, and they just refused to believe it, even though I give you a mountain of evidence that you really can't refute. So a Navy SEAL contacted us and said, hey, I was a Navy SEAL for 20, 30 years. My name's Eric Demings, and a lot of us SEALs are really pissed off at Marcus Luttrell for taking credit for something he didn't do. He didn't fight like a hero. He left his teammates to die, and he wrote a book on the contrary and became famous and rich off of something he didn't do. And I was like, well, you willing to come on the podcast and say that? He said, absolutely. And so, well, I guess we're doing Marcus Luttrell now. And so we did Marcus Luttrell. And then we kind of got labeled as SEAL haters, which I hate. That's absolutely not true. I couldn't have any more respect for SEALs just because a few bad apples in what is historically an amazing unit full of amazing men just isn't the truth. Just again, just a few bad apples that needed to be called out. And there's more coming from. Now I'm on a roll, and there's more coming from a different branch of service.
Okay. Well, I cannot wait to hear what you have to say about those. Let's talk about where people can find you and find out more about you, because you're telling you you're an interesting guy. I've loved getting to know you.
Well, I appreciate that. I really enjoy you inviting me on and having me. I really appreciate the research that you did on me, because it led to good questions, and I can tell you had those good questions because you did the hard work before this episode. And it shows. And coming from someone who has a podcast, I recognize that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the podcast I do is called the Anti-Hero Podcast. What we do mostly is talk about first responder stories and even military stories. Calling out stolen valor and liars is something we do here and there, but it's not the majority of the work we do. We prefer to promote people that do an amazing job for their communities and for this country. That's the Anti-Hero Podcast. You can check us out on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify. We're on all the platforms. And for my business, you can go to either frccoffee.com or frccigars.com. It leads you both to the same website. You get coffee and cigars, but the same website. And our Instagram is FRC Coffee. So, and I check our DMs almost daily. I'm not always really good at getting back to people, but I do get back to almost everyone. And I love answering people and interacting with people. So feel free to reach out to me.
I would recommend. I got one more question. I would recommend people watch it on the YouTube and watch you two how you interact with each other. And two, I've got to ask if you have ventilation in that room, because
we don't yet. Thankfully, we have a Patreon, and the Patreon is paying for a lot of our upgrades. And the very next upgrade is going to be a smoke eater. It's about a $2,000 piece of equipment in here, but we need one desperately, because when you get 3 or 4 guys in this podcast studio smoking, we can even though we have an air purifier, it doesn't have a chance at 4 cigars.
Right. Well, so what's the end goal here? What's next for you? What do you think's going to happen? How are you looking to grow and pivot yet once again?
So the coffee side, I mean, we were in talks with, now these are kind of southern stores, but Publix grocery store. We're in talks with them this year. We're in talks with Winn-Dixie. So we didn't make the list on either one of those this year. But the great thing about that is, like, when you start talking to those people, you know, you get a chance back at them the very next year. So to be even on their radar in our first 2.5 years of business is amazing. And so our job is just to continue to organically grow, and then eventually start getting into grocery stores, which I'm positive we will. It's just a matter of time. We just stay afloat long enough, we'll get into there, and that'll be life changing for us. And at that point, I don't think we'll ever have to say no to another person for telling us of one of their friends, teammates, or coworkers that got hurt on the line of duty. So the coffee side has a lot of promise coming up, and of course the cigar side. We just bought a motorhome, and we're about to motorhome all over the state of Florida, going to cigar lounge to cigar lounge, telling people our story and our product. And we're already, thankfully, because people know us and know what we do and what we stand for, we're in probably another 10 or 15 cigar lounges throughout the United States. If people just saying, hey, I go to this cigar lounge, I'm friends with the owner, reach out to them, I told them about you. So the cigar side continues to expand on the wholesale side, just through word of mouth. But we're about to take this show on the road and really explode that part of the business, and I can't wait.
I don't think anything more Florida has ever been said than other than getting in a mobile home and traveling around. All right, guys. Man, I love that you came on here. You have such a great story, and I'm so glad that we got to talk and sit down. It's been a long time coming. Guys, you know where you can find Brent. Let's talk about where you can find me. As always, you can find me on Instagram, the DTD_podcast. You can find me on YouTube at the DTD Podcast. And you can find me on Facebook at the DTD Podcast. But back to YouTube, that's where you get all your videos of this. You get to see what we look like. You get to see what's going on as we're interviewing each other. But your one-stop shop, dtdpodcast.net. It's got everything. It's going to have pictures of Brent when he finally sends them to me, when he fills out his guest intake sheet. That'll all be there. It'll have all the links where you can find him, and you'll learn a little more about his story. Whether you want to pick up some of his products or just know more about him, it's all going to be at dtdpodcast.net. He's going to have his own page. And you can also check out audio and video, whichever one, and by whatever system you would like to do it in. Guess what, guys? That's going to be it for this show. Make sure you stop by my sponsors, TridentCoffee.com, MaxBelts.com. They are making phenomenal headway in both the nitro cold brew area and belts for the world today. Make sure you stop by them. TridentCoffee.com, MaxBelts.com. That's going to be it for this week. That's Brent. I'm DJ. This has been the show. We'll catch you guys on the next one. See you later.